My name is Meryl Richards, and I'm currently working for the CGIAR research program on climate change, agriculture, and food security. This research was part of my PhD dissertation in the Plant and Soil Science Department with Ernesto Mendez, who is also a fellow. We know that there's currently too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and along with other greenhouse gases. And we also know that trees remove some of that carbon dioxide and sequester it as biomass carbon. And thus forests are very critical to climate change mitigation. We can also, aside from protecting natural forests, we can also incorporate trees into crop and livestock systems, a practice called agroforestry. The trees that are usually incorporated into these systems tend to be ones that are useful for the land managers, for example, for forage or for food or for timber or firewood. What we don't really know is whether the species diversity of those trees matters to the carbon sequestration potential of that system. Ecologists think that it might, for two reasons. First, more species with varying resource needs might mean that resources such as light and nutrients are used more fully, and thus the system is more productive. It could also be that more species means a greater chance of key species in the system, key highly productive species. Thus, the system is more productive and sequesters more carbon. One agroforestry system that is noted for its carbon sequestration potential and biodiversity is coffee. Farmers grow coffee under varying levels of shade and biodiversity. At say the lowest tree level, there are just the coffee bushes, which you can see. Or maybe you can't, but you can see, I can't necessarily point to over on the right side, with no shade tree canopy. Coffee can also be grown under a canopy with just one or two species, what's called a technified system. And it can also be grown under what closely resembles natural forests, so a very diverse shade canopy. Now we know that tree diversity would increase along this gradient, going from no trees at all to a diverse shade canopy. But what about carbon? Obviously, carbon would also increase going from no shade trees to the upper level system. But what about systems where the number of trees might remain the same? Is there any difference in the carbon sequester between, say, the middle system in this diagram and the top system? That's what we set out to investigate in a 35-hectare shade coffee plantation that is somewhere between that middle and top system in El Salvador between 2001 and 2010. The system did sequester carbon. This is not surprising, trees grow. But what was interesting was that in areas where the species richness was greater in 2001, the system sequestered more carbon between 2001 and 2010. We didn't necessarily find a relationship between the standing species richness, or the species richness in the system in either year, and the standing carbon stock in that year. So there were no significant correlations between species richness and carbon stock at either point in time. So what does this mean? Species diversity might matter to carbon sequestration, but not necessarily to carbon stocks. And you can read the whole story along with all of the caveats in the paper coming out in Conservation Biology and